Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pitts. Ukraine War News Update, first part there of the 13th of June 2024. I forgot what year it was then. I'm going to be giving a talk in North Hampshire in the Andover area on Saturday. If any of you guys are around that kind of general area, please pop along. The email to ask about that is in the description below. There should be a few of us there. It's not going to be a huge event, but it'd be lovely to meet some of you and have a pint and whatnot and talk about the kind of things that I talk about every single day. Far too much. Anyway, let's get on with the news. So this is a hits and losses video. We start with the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. You can find them in the description to the video found below. We have 980 personnel lost. That's dipped under 1,000. This is what we've seen over the last week or so. It's coming down slowly, but still an incredibly high number. 17 tanks is an uptick in that category. 21 armored personnel vehicles is above average, and 34 artillery systems is about double average. So double tanks, double artillery systems, and above average on personnel vehicles. So it's quite a challenging day for the Russians. 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems lost as well, and 58 vehicles and fuel tanks, 4 pieces of special equipment. We'll move on to Andrew Perpetua's lost stats, and as you can see here, we have, it's not parity, but it's moving towards that. It's only about 1.5 at the most losses, Russian losses to Ukrainian losses. So worst day for the Ukrainians, that's definite. In terms of just the raw numbers, let's look at the value. And here we have, okay, Su-27 missile strike, unclear if each mount protected the plane from shrapnel, could be undamaged. So there's a damaged plane, Su-27. I showed you some videos yesterday of a number of air bases being targeted, and this is part of that. My thoughts is that the Ukrainians have probably got away with, considering that 3 air bases were struck over the last few days with not taking as much damage as they possibly could have done. But they also, as I again showed you yesterday, did have an S-300 battery heavily, taken out predominantly by Iskander missiles. That is a really huge loss there. So S-300 transporter erector launcher. We've got the command vehicle. We've got a radar. Although that was a Lancer, I don't think that was not part of the system. And we have the universal mast as a part of the system. All of those are destroyed. So that is really high value equipment for the Ukrainians. S-300s do a really good job of your general air defense. We complain about S-300s, S-400s not taking out ATACMS, but for the Ukrainians, they are the workhorse of their air defense, and it's a huge loss if they lose S-300s components like that. As mentioned, radar, engineering vehicle, some artillery pieces there, M109. I don't know what that is, a YAD Zastava M75. But anyway, that's been destroyed. A couple of damaged howitzers there. Marder infantry fighting vehicle destroyed. Yet again, we are seeing Western equipment in the lists of equipment to a much higher proportion being lost. Here in the infantry fighting vehicles, there's only one, but it's Western. In the APCs, 50%, there's only 2, but 1 is Western. And then MRAP, there's only 1, but it's Western. With the artillery, at least one of those is Western. I don't know about the Zastava M75, probably is West. Well, I don't know. You're just seeing a lot more of the Western equipment as they have cycled through probably a lot of their legacy equipment previously. Right, civilian vehicles there, half of those destroyed, half damaged, usual kind of equipment. But it's really the plane and the air defense and the radar at the top. I mean, that's really high value stuff for the Ukrainians. Now for the Russians, we have a Buk M2 air defense being destroyed. I think I reference that. I showed you that yesterday. We have a Strela 10 short-range air defense also destroyed, so that's going to hurt the Russians a little bit, and also a KP-5N63S radar and a Zupart 1 radar, so that's damaged. That's I think a fairly high value bit of equipment. So there's a few things that are going to be smarting for the Russians there. Engineering vehicles, a whole load of them being damaged, one destroyed and excavated destroyed, but a lot of these EOV 3521s, and a number of them were taken out yesterday as well. So the Ukrainians are really targeting the Russian engineering vehicles at the moment, and I wonder whether those are engineering vehicles that are active north of the border, maybe in the Kursk or Belgorod oblasts, as they are kind of digging positions, or maybe even south of the border, digging positions behind Vovchansk and what have you. Artillery, so it's a few bits of that. Some tanks, as per normal, all of them destroyed or abandoned. Infantry fighting vehicles, almost all of those destroyed or abandoned. And APCs, all of those destroyed. So the losses for the Russians are quite heavy on the destroyed by the looks of the list today. Now, with the tanks, I mentioned track guard and shed, as I do every day, and somebody asked me, what is a track guard and shed? I forget that not everyone watches all of the videos, and so I make assumptions. That's why I try to repeat myself a lot, because I know there's an awful lot of people that don't obviously catch all the videos, and 50% of people are newbies. This is a track guard and shed. So some people call them turtle tanks. Some people call them Bliat Mobile. Basically, you get usually a tank, but you can see these with infantry fighting vehicles having what looks like a garden shed built on top. This has an anti-drone piece of weaponry, but you can see it's taken a drone blast, so don't always work. The question for these vehicles is, well, the first question is why, and it's because they're using them to protect or to drive a lot of troops to a landing point and drop them off. So they are being used as glorified infantry fighting vehicles, or APCs. You have the iron sheeting on top to protect those people, and sometimes, I mean, we have seen a tank having 25 people get off the top of it. They are now protected with the sheeting, and often have hatches at the side so that they can get out with greater ease, rather than just at the back as they did originally. And you see these charging at the Ukrainian enemy lines, usually first in a convoy of several vehicles, but sometimes just on their own. So the next question is, well, is this optimal? Because as you can see there, the turret cannot be rotated. So there is an argument that actually it could be that these tanks are faulty in some way. So maybe the barrel's gone, or some issue with the turret. And so instead of repairing the vehicle and having it off the front lines for some time and eventually getting it back after, some prolonged period, just use the tank and turn it into an APC or an IFV. Or it is a tank with a fully functioning turret. And again, the question is, why don't you do this to an IFV or an APC? Why are you using a tank like this suboptimally? So an awful lot of questions come out from this, but the simple fact of the matter is, A, the Russians are using lots of these, and B, they do have functional benefit for protecting those people. It's just whether that is the best use of that kind of vehicle. It's still so many questions as to whether the Russians are in a desperate situation to be using so many of these. They've only lost one today, but they are a common sight on the loss list on a daily basis. Now, Russians have lost a really high value bit of kit by all accounts. This is the newest communication station they have, R416GM. First time we've seen this since the beginning of the full-scale war, and it was a result of a couple of drones striking it. It does communication between the command post and Russian army units. This was in the Kursk region that it was hit. Hit twice, and the one that hits at the back there then starts a fire sparking, and then the video cuts out. So I don't know how badly damaged it is, but it is a as mentioned, a high-value bit of kit, radio relay station, and in Kursk as well. So this could be part of a potential assault across the borders, a border down into Sumy, communicating between the units there. So that's a good haul for the Ukrainians. Mentioned in a number of places because it is a bit of a rarity. Right, then moving on to French aid to Ukraine, saying, according to several informed sources, Ukraine launches between 100,000 and 150,000 kamikaze drones every month, but only 10 to 20% of these drones reach their target. The reasons are pilot error, hardware failure, the effectiveness of enemy jamming, or even the distance between the operator and his drone. Okay, first thing to note is, if these stats are true, then the Ukrainians have massively scaled up their production and procurement of drones. But it's also on target, because the Ukrainians said that they would be producing over 1 million, or getting hold of. They would have, I think, producing 1 million drones a year. And this 100,000 a month gives you 1.2 million. Right, but if it's more than 100,000, 100 to 150,000, then my goodness, they have really scaled up. So that's the first thing, and there is no surprise that the Russians are complaining that the Ukrainians have a drone advantage across the front lines. This is coming from Le Figaro, a French news media outlet. But yeah, anyway, so that is good news there. The other interesting nugget is 10 to 20% success ratio. And I don't know if that is, I think that's about what I'd heard previously. I've heard some units have better success ratios, and that is going to be up and down along the front line, depending on where the Russians have their best both air defense and mainly electronic warfare and jamming capabilities. It is the case that you have to have an awful lot of drones ready to go, because you quite often, I mean, I referenced a video done recently, I can't remember who it's done by, showing this one unit who were pretty good. I think they had 40 units ready to go. So 40 drones just stacked, ready to go, fly them off, that one failed, fly it off, that one failed, we got it. They were talking about one target, and they finally got it with their very last drone they had for the day. But I think that target, the electronic warfare, brought down 4 or 5, and basically you just got to keep going, maybe come in from different angles or what have you. And yeah, there's just it's quite a low success rate, and they had a high success rate than 10 to 20% here though. But you just need an awful lot of drones in order to get the ones that are effective. So every time we see these images of drones hitting a vehicle, there are 9 other drones, or 5 other drones, or whatever it is, that are missing, or that had technical failure, or were jammed, or whatever. So all of those different reasons. Although late to the kamikaze drone game, French manufacturers are developing systems that offer solutions to some of these problems, in particular resistance or insensitivity to jamming. With the arrival of the first prototypes this summer, this challenge for France will be to supply several thousand units by 2025, but to do this, manufacturers need orders. It would take several tens of thousands of units, like the Veloce 330, that very quick, larger drone that we saw, to get close to 80% target. So here, obviously from a very French point of view, as being French aid to Ukraine, the source here, saying that what we've heard an awful lot previously, that actually manufacturers just need these confirmed orders. They're ready to go, but are they going to get the orders from, in this case, the French government? Right. Moving on to, yes, distant strikes. So it appears to have been a very quiet night. I don't know of any strikes either way, from Ukraine into Russia or Russia into Ukraine. Now, yesterday, there was an almost 100% interception rate. There was one missile that got through in Iskander, don't know where that was, and there was talk about debris falling down on an industrial area in the Kyiv region. Now, a fire had started yesterday. Apparently, this fire is still going. So I don't know if this is definitely debris from a drone or missile, whether it's a missile that got through, or whether the Ukrainians are lying and this was the actual target that was hit, and they claimed that it was debris falling. Because it looks, even though they are still claiming it's a, scare quotes, industrial enterprise, you can see from even the blurred out photos that this looks like an oil depot. And that actually, if it's burning 24 hours later, then yeah, it probably is an oil depot. So this is a significant fire that's taking place. This is some infrastructure that the Ukrainians would rue losing, a supply of oil. I don't know how many of these storage units are on fire, have been damaged, but certainly, as you can see there, one of them is still burning at the moment. Questions to be asked. Firefighters have been extinguishing a fire at an industrial enterprise in Kyiv region for about 16 hours, so actually now longer, which started as a result of nighttime Russian strike. A total of 247 personnel, 111 pieces of equipment, and 4 fire trains are working at the scene, so you can imagine how much fire there is there. Now, there is mourning for those killed in a rocket attack that took place in Kryvyi Rih. A residential neighborhood saw from an attack the day before 9 dying, so that's a really high number. I've not reported this. I don't know whether this is part of the strikes that took place not last night but the night before that I was just talking about, or whether this is something that took place in the daytime. The number of victims remains the same. Wounded has increased to 32, including 5 children. So this is pretty horrible strike by the looks of it, but I don't know what was struck, what the target was, whether it's hitting a target or is brought down by air defense or whatever. Russian Kh-101 cruise missiles targeting Ukrainian energy infrastructure now weigh about 800 kilograms and have been modified 4 times, says defense expert Ivan Krychevsky. Modifications have doubled missiles' destructive powers. Moreover, Russians have resorted to another insidious tactic. So this is a worry for the Ukrainians, considering that considering that they were problematic enough previously anyway, cruise missiles, and now having double the destructive capability is something of an issue. I don't know what he means by insidious. So he says the Kh-101 been modified 4 times, where the warheads has a cluster munition. The problem is if the missile is shot down, the cluster munitions from the missile are scattered and hit the target over a large area. In the past, we could observe that when a missile was shot down, it fell and the warhead landed without detonating. However, now the Russians have resorted to a new tactic. So just make sure, to a devious tactic where the missile causes damage even when it is shot down. Okay, so cluster munition. I presume that if it gets shot down, I don't know how to read this. Does it then explode with its cluster munitions and then they drop down and cause damage? So shooting the missile down causes immense amount of damage, compared to how it used to have been, which is a single unitary warhead just falling out of the sky and often not detonating. That is a challenge. So it could be that you go back to this burning oil depot, you shoot a warhead like that down, or you hit it as it's traveling over some kind of industrial complex, and you've suddenly got all of these cluster munitions exploding stuff underneath it. So yeah, big challenge for the Ukrainians again. Now, the Voronezh M radar, that was the over the horizon big sort of 3,000 kilometer radar that is used for acquiring targets, particularly kind of nuclear missiles, part of the nuclear defense of Russia, and a couple of these have been targeted. Well, the one Voronezh M radar in Orsk is apparently not going to be working for 6 months after the drone strike, said Krylo Budanov, head of intelligence. These systems detect any ballistics. It doesn't matter if it's nuclear missile or not. The Voronezh M was aimed at the southern part of Ukraine, in particular the Odessa region and occupied Crimea, so temporarily disabling it will help us. So there's a lot of talk after that was struck, and the other one, that this is a kind of escalatory move by the Ukrainians, and it didn't convey any kind of advantage. Like it wasn't anything to do with the war. It wasn't functional in the war in Ukraine with regard to acquiring targets. And actually, then the counter argument was actually yes, it does, and it can see ballistic missiles, it can see airplanes, etc., etc. And the Ukrainians taking it out did bring an advantage to them on the battlefield, and this is what Budanov is saying here. He's also said something else, which is pretty fascinating. I've talked about the S-500 before as a kind of prototype, not really used, but it is their newest best air defense system. We talk about the S-400 Triumph system as their best system that they practically use and have a fair number of. And then, of course, you go back to the S-300s and you have different variations of the S-300s that can get almost to the ability of the S-400. But the S-500 is not something we've heard being used. Well, Budanov claims that Russia's placed an S-500 air defense system in occupied Crimea, and that is interesting and could show that the Russians are desperate, that they want to stop ATACMS being utilized in Crimea, so they're going to bring in their very best air defense system that costs an awful lot of money. I forget the cost of it. I wonder if it has it in this article. No. So we'll just go through this. Russian forces have installed their latest S-500 air defense system in occupied Crimea. Quote, the Russian air defense system is being strengthened. Budanov said this is quite obvious and understandable. The newest elements of the S-500 have appeared. In principle, this will be their experimental application, but they have already appeared there in Crimea. Earlier this week, the Ukrainian General Staff announced that Ukraine's military had destroyed 2 radars of the S-300 and S-400 air defense systems in several areas of occupied Crimea. This was the second attack on Russia's air defences in Crimea in a week. Ukraine reportedly hit 1 S-400 anti-aircraft missile unit near Jankoy, and 2 more S-300 anti-aircraft missile units were attacked near occupied Chornomorska and Yevpatoria overnight on June the 10th. According to US Department of Defense, the S-500 is designed to intercept short to medium-range threats. The system can reportedly defend against ballistic, cruise and hypersonic missiles. So it's going to be a bit of a test. I think the Americans and anyone's going to be watching closely to see what the success of the S-500 is, because there's been a lot of scorn poured on the S-400 for not being able to take out the ATACMS, which have taken out the S-400s themselves. And the idea is that you've got a 40-year-old American weapon taking out a much newer the best Russian air defense weapon. Well, now they've got kind of experimentally got their S-500 in position that supposedly can intercept those ATACMS. My goodness, it'll be embarrassing for the Russians if we find that the ATACMS can take out the S-500. I'm positive the Ukrainians are going to be gunning to destroy that, because it would be a bit of a PR coup. Whether the S-500 is definitely in place, you never know with Budanov. He's in charge of intelligence, and not quite sure what his intentions are in that very deadpan face of his behind the mask. Anyway, moving on to other bits and pieces. Guardian reports that Russia has been accused of deliberate starvation tactics in Mariupol in a submission to the International Criminal Court. Lawyers say strategy of denying food and services to people in the Ukrainian city during the siege could amount to war crime. There are lots of cases being submitted to the either being submitted to the ICC or actually just having an awful lot of evidence meticulously gathered, sifted through, assimilated, synthesized, ready to go to court. This is one of those slightly rarer occasions or events in history where people are collecting the evidence while the war is still going on in the country. So usually you kind of wait for these events to finish and the wars to end, and then you get people coming in and finding out what happened, and then submissions to the court. And same with demining, actually. You've got a war going on and people demining, and all these organizations, Halo Trust, etc., coming in and trying to clear up all the mines that are being used by both sides. And it's good that on both of those topics, there's a lot of proactive behaviour from those involved. And I know that, what's the organisation called? I forget. There's a really great organization that's training up journalists to be able to interview people who have been involved in these war crimes to make sure that they get sensitively really good quality evidence that is as objective as possible pertaining to what has happened over the course of the war, so that evidence can then be submitted and people are hopefully eventually held accountable for their actions. Right, Russia on Tuesday issued a state of emergency in the Rostov region, one of the country's most productive grain regions. I talked about this the other day a little bit, but earlier on Tuesday, the head of Russia's grain union said up to 30% of winter grain was hit by frosts, a larger percentage than suggested by the agricultural ministry. So there could be a real issue for the Russians. You know, Rostov is a major agricultural region of Russia. Russia is one of the breadbaskets of the world, as is Ukraine, and they will need this. I mean, the whole world needs a supply of food in order to have enough to eat. So this is not good. On the one hand, it's not good news for the world. On the other hand, Russia will be hit in their pocket if there's a really bad grain haul, and it's like because this will mean people will starve, people will go hungry if there's a lack of food being supplied to the world. But so that's happened. Russian Telegram channel VCHK OGPU, I never know how to pronounce that one, it seems to be a major source of information. It cited a source about the new US sanctions on Russia. Okay, the US has imposed murderous sanctions against Russia. Moscow Exchange, National Settlement Depository, and National Clearing Center went under the knife. These organizations used to determine the exchange rate of the dollar, euro, and yuan against the ruble. Now this has come to an end. The rate will be determined by the central bank, looking at some mysterious platforms. In fact, there will be two rates, official and shadow, starting on June the 12th. Everyone rushed to the exchanges to take out cash. The main thing is that our wise rulers did not prohibit the storage of currency, or they'll remember Article 88 of the Criminal Code of the USSR. In turn, the clever and cunning has warned in advance. Everyone wondered why the dollar rate was below 90. Everything is simple. Government people bought currency in their own interest and withdrew it into foreign stashes. The last channel of cash withdrawal was Raiffeisen Bank, so that's a Austrian bank. On June the 7th, it sank into oblivion. So what's going on here? There's lots of kind of slightly butchered English interpretation of things going on. So the United States are introducing sanctions against the Moscow Exchange and the Russian National Clearing Center, according to the US Treasury. The Moscow Exchange already said that from June the 13th, there will be no trading in dollars and euros there. I mean, this is really big. The Moscow Stock Exchange suspends trading in dollars and euros due to US sanctions, a return to the 1990s, says Jürgen Naudit. And my goodness, that's an interesting looking graph there. This applies to all markets where currency stocks and precious metals are usually exchanged. The decision could affect equipment supplies, manufacturing, education, and scientific projects, all of which depend on foreign currencies. It is expected that the dollar exchange rate will be determined through over-the-counter transactions via banks rather than the stock exchange as usual, reminiscent of the situation in the 1990s. And in response to the continuation of the war in Ukraine by the Russian Federation, the United States imposed sanctions against Mosbiji. Once again, Putin, the great strategist, has outdone everyone. And Jane Kiev says the third largest brokerage in Russia has just halted all withdrawals for Euro and USD accounts. Bummer. And now, Gazprom Bank is down. Following Rosbank, Gazprom Bank is preventing clients from logging in. The Russian banks are seeking to prevent a digital run on the banks. So everyone's panicking and they want to stop people just withdrawing all sorts of cash as clients are seeking to withdraw all of their deposits. It is not looking good for the Russians today. In fact, trouble in paradise here. No report says after yesterday's introduction of a new package of sanctions against Russia, lines are forming in exchange offices. Brokers have reportedly started blocking Russians from withdrawing currency. It's how's the 3-day special military operation going, Putin? Going well, I take it. So yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. A couple more things. Another body has been found in Tizia. So what's going on here? Body of man was found while patrolling the Ukrainian-Hungarian border. The body washed ashore. This is the 35th such case of Ukrainian men dying while trying to swim across the river and leave Ukraine. This is a common occurrence, sadly. and it shows the desperation that is felt by many, predominantly men, well, entirely men, I think, the desperation they feel concerning mobilization and the percentage chance of dying or getting injured, such that they try some pretty risky crossings across rivers to get into, in this case, Hungary. We've had it with Romania. We've had people on like lilos on airbeds sort of in the middle of the sea trying to get to places, or in the middle of lakes and rivers. I don't know. I've seen various images trying to get to countries, but completely unprepared in quite incredible ways. Just like they've gone to the local shop, bought a lilo, and just not got like wetsuits or anything like that. Just like jumped on in their clothes and thought, right, I'm hot footing it, if you like, to the next country. And just again, I guess that shows how desperate some people are to escape being signed up. And then finally, we're going to go to the Kyiv Independent. After Russia destroyed the Kakhovka Dam last year, plants and wildlife have returned to its reservoir. In just 1 year, the tallest saplings tower up to 5 meters high and number 20 plants per square meter. This is one of those things maybe that if you could get scientists in there, they would be absolutely fascinated to see how things can bounce back. I remember reading about how the Second World War, when trawlers stopped being able to fish so widely due to German U-boats and whatnot, like over 5 years, fish stocks absolutely bounced back insanely in the Atlantic and areas like that. And it goes towards the theory that you should have like areas of marine conservation where you just give it a couple of years off and then move to there, and then if you give certain areas time off, then they can actually bounce back and you get more fish and it's actually more beneficial. Anyway, it's not quite to do with what we're talking about here, but it is really great news to think that after such a massive environmental catastrophe that there are some green shoots of hope. Deer and boar could roam forests in the Kakhovka Reservoir in 5 years, head of National Reserve says. Interesting to see how quickly they're going to rebuild that dam, if indeed they are. Obviously, it's such a big project, you'd have to wait till the war properly ends. But yeah, we'll pop into this a little bit. It's too long an article, but you can go and find it. We'll just read the beginning. Following the destruction of the dam on June 6th last year, nearly 20 cubic kilometers of water flooded Ukraine's 4 southern oblasts, causing a massive humanitarian environmental crisis. Caused water shortages because, of course, the Kakhovka Reservoir fed irrigation both to the south in Zaporizhia and Kherson Oblast on the left bank of the river, but also on the right bank going up towards Kryvyi Rih. So it has huge ecological but also agricultural ramifications. A year later, 1,600 square kilometers of native poplar and willow trees have sprouted across the former reservoir. Landscape hasn't been so lush since before the Soviets flooded the plain to construct the dam in 1956. This is a huge coincidence, Mikhailo Mulenko, acting head of the nature protection sector of the Khortytsia National Reserve, told reporters at a press tour in Zaporizhia to mark the anniversary of the explosion. So, it's just nice that there's at least some seeds of hope after such a terrible event. Timing of the attack coincided with the pollination of the willow and poplar trees in May, with seeds spreading across the stagnant waters of the reservoir and sinking into the mud. After the reservoir was drained, the seeds, still stuck in the mud, began to germinate and grow rapidly. Quote, if the Kakhovskaya Dam had been blown up in March or August, the situation would have been completely different and much worse. So fascinating, the fact that it blew up at the time it did meant it acted as a huge seed dispersal. In just 1 year, the tallest saplings tower up to 5 meters high and number 20 plants per square meter. The trees have guzzled up recent spring floods, helping their growth. Mulenko predicts that wild deer and boar could roam the forest in just 5 years' time if conditions remain the same, echoing its pre-Soviet life as part of the Veliki Lu Great Meadow. So on and so forth. Just this last bit actually. Under the trees on the north side of the reservoir nearby Khortytsia Island in Zaporizhia Oblast, Ukraine's Academy of Scientists noted at least 100 species of herbaceous plants and mosses forming a new ecosystem. It's cool when nature fights back. Love it. Okay. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, subscribe and share. Take care. I'll speak to you guys soon.